So I think my property lesson in my 30s is property portfolio. So building that property portfolio. You know, if I had spent that time and money and energy in building that property portfolio from Penrith onwards, my portfolio would be completely different today compared to if I was gung-ho in doing townhouse. So the way I look at it is maybe in my 20s, I was maybe more of an active investor. I'll do the renos myself. I'll try to participate and do the subdivisions and do the townhouses. Whereas in my 30s and 40s, I recognize time is valuable. Energy is limited, and property portfolio with a team is critical. You know, people can do the research, they can tell you where the data and analytics is really pointing to, and you just build that portfolio and grow your asset and your income. Hi, it's Scott from Catching Up with Property. Usually I'll be your host, but today I've got my friend Pauline here. She's an interior designer by trade, but in this episode, she's going to be interviewing me instead.
Are you ready?
I am totally not ready, but let's go.
Excellent. So tell me, Scott, why are you doing this podcast about property?
I chose to do this podcast, Catching Up with Property, because I just wanted to bring another lens to property in general. Property can be quite wide. You know, most people think property is maybe one type of asset, but actually there's multiple types of assets. And then there's also depth in that subject as well. So the way to protect it, the way to acquire it, the way to borrow for it, the way to, you know, purchase your assets and build your portfolio. So I just thought with my experience and my network, I could maybe share something with, you know, the world.
I knew you were going to say that. That's awesome. Thanks for that. So tell everyone who's listening and viewing this about how you grew up.
How I grew up? Well, I grew up in southwest Sydney in a suburb called Punchbowl. So, you know, I could be Scotty from Punchy.
Yes.
But growing up was household of 3 kids, family of 5. Parents were immigrant parents, background being Chinese Indonesian, hence the tan. And yeah, so I went to a Catholic school, grew up around Punchbowl. High school was Lakemba. So if anybody remembers Lakemba and they're old enough, there used to be a police station.
Used to be.
There used to be. And that police station got sprayed. Sprayed as in machine gun. AK-47. So they had to shut down that police station. It was literally outside our school.
Right.
So yeah, I grew up in that type of environment. But no, look, I think I turned out as a good egg. Mum and dad was importers and wholesalers, so learnt a lot from them, from, you know, just outsourcing sales and business building. Yeah.
How old are you now?
How old am I now? 21.
Yes.
38.
Okay, good. So 38 years old.
Yes.
So tell everyone, how did you start your property journey?
Property journey. Well, I never intended my property journey. I think I must have acquired the first one when I was maybe 21, 22.
Yeah.
It was kind of left field. My brother wanted to buy a property at that time. And he was like, oh, why don't you go halves with me and buy one? Never thought of property at all. And mum was going to front up the deposit. So yeah, got into our first property that way.
With your family?
With my family.
Wow, that's brave.
Yeah. Lots of lessons learnt.
Yeah. And you're living in Sydney now?
I'm living in Sydney now. Yes.
Are you renting? Are you living in your own property?
I am a viral rentvestor. Yes.
And what does that mean?
A rentvestor, meaning I rent and I invest in property. Yeah.
Okay, so you've told us about your first property. Do you still have that first property that you bought with your mum and your brother? Or
No, so we bought that property in Bankstown. At the time, we kind of tossed up between 3 locations. It was Surrey Hills, Newtown, or Bankstown. We end up choosing Bankstown. If only we knew.
Yeah.
But no, we did sell that and part ways with that investment. So it did give us rewards, but yeah, I think it did its job.
Yeah. And tell us about your next property.
Next property. So the next property was in Penrith. I bought that on my own. Very proud.
And how old were you then?
I don't know, I think it was 25, 26.
Wow.
Yeah, that was in Penrith. At the time, we just came out of GFC. Property market was pretty stale. Lending was pretty stale. I was an assistant private banker in St. George, and that's when I kind of negotiated everything and bought it on my own. But on that salary, I could only afford out in Penrith.
Yep.
And at the time when I kind of told everybody I was buying in Penrith,
Everyone said, "What are you doing?"
what are you doing? Why are you buying in the bush? It's actually not in the bush. It's on the outskirts of Sydney and the foot of the mountains. But yeah, I can understand everybody's concerns. But at the time, I was kind of like learning property through this group, and they just said, why don't you go out that way?
So you joined a property group,
Not
or was this for your work?
Not a property group, but I learnt property through one of these property seminars. If anybody follows Dittner, then yeah, I kind of learnt through her course, the ultimate.
Yeah.
And there was some key people in that group that kind of just went, hey, think about Penrith because that's probably where you can afford. So I did buy in Penrith and we did live in it for a little while, renovated it, did everything ourselves. Very old house, wallpaper from the 60s. We had to spray it, iron it, scratch it off. Yeah.
And you did that all yourself?
Yeah, with good friends.
Wow, impressive. Okay, so that was your second property. You bought it on your own.
Yeah.
Do you still have that property?
I do have that property. I signed that contract on my birthday. It was a gift to myself. I recommend it to everybody, buying a property and signing it on their birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, so I still have that property. My intention for that property was to actually develop it. So we went through a process of putting a DA for 4 townhouses on it. It took a long time going through back and forth with council. Pretty much took 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But by the time we actually got it to that point where we could submit, council had changed their rules and said, your frontage is not wide enough. I'm like, what? What do you mean? I've been talking to you guys for like 3 years about this. But anyway, they changed their rules. So that's gone out the water. But it's also the location of that property has been really, really good. And it's probably tripled in value since I bought it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're still winning.
Yeah, still winning.
Yeah. Screw you, Penrith Council. I'm assuming it's Penrith Council. I'm not sure.
It is.
Okay, so backtrack. I should have asked you this before.
Yeah.
How many properties have you owned, like in your lifetime?
In my lifetime,
Yeah.
maybe 4. So we had the Bankstown one, we had
Yep.
the Penrith one. After the Penrith one, after I renovated, I pulled out some equity and then I bought another house out in the country in a small town called Marywall, thinking it's part of the Upper Hunter region, wanting to do the same thing, knock it down and
And
put some
flip it, yeah.
townhouses. But that one, when I bought it, there was something wrong with the fence anyway. So anyway, story time. The neighbor calls me 3 days after the property settles, and I just stretched all my borrowing to acquire this next property with the intention of knocking down, putting some townhouses on it, or renovating the front and maybe putting another one on the back. Those were my options. And the neighbor calls me 3 days later and he says, oh, hi, are you the new owner for this property? I went, yes, I am. What do you want? And then she goes, we own the property next door and it's an aged care facility. And I'm like, okay. And, one of our tenants got out last night and ran over the fence. And I'm like,
You mean one of the patients?
yeah. And then I went, how does this affect me? Like, why are you calling me? And then she goes, it's a barbed wire and the resident kind of ran over the fence and injured himself. I went, okay, like, am I up for
So you were
like
freaking
injury
out.
or liability or something? Completely freaking out.
Yeah.
And then she goes, no, we probably need to repair that fence and maybe put a proper fence instead of barbed wire because it's pretty dangerous. And I went, I've just bought this property. I don't have a single cent left. And then she goes, well, we're council owned. Have you considered of maybe subdividing your land and selling it to us?
Wow. So this
Yeah.
was all over the phone.
This was all over the phone.
lady you'd never met before.
Never met her. And then she suggested that. So I ended up subdividing the back of that land, negotiating a good deal. I negotiated that they pay for all the fees, my fees, their fees, and all of the subdivision costs
Yeah.
for that property. And then I still had a good size on that block as well. So I still had the front house and enough there to maybe put another house or maybe put 3 townhouses on it. Oh, that was
What
property
a
number
story.
3.
Yeah. And how old were you when you bought property number 3?
Must have been 27, 28, yeah.
Explain to everyone again. So you used the equity from your Penrith property to buy.
So rented the Penrith property. Penrith property is a weatherboard old home. Never been touched. So it's never been updated. So it was really easy to bring it up to scratch.
Yeah.
And put some improvements and just bring up that value. And on top of that, I think I bought it right at that point where the market was stale. And then next year, Penrith started to go up.
Yeah.
So there was equity built into that property. So I took out the equity available there to buy the Merriwell one, the country one.
Yeah. And you still have the
country one?
property?
I do. Bit of a pain and pleasure.
Yeah. So
Pain and pleasure.
So you sold the land, you made some money.
Yes. Sold the land, made some money, and then I had the front house renovated. We did a lot of the work ourselves. We also got some guys to come in and reno. So we gutted it, refreshed it, put in a new kitchen, bathroom, etc. Except you watch these property shows and you're like, oh, do it yourself. Oh, find the handyman, find this person, blah, 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 blah. And then what I didn't realize at the time was, it's really important to make sure that all your tradesmen are qualified, number one, and two,
Licensed.
They've got license and they're insured. And then anyway, we finished renovating the property, beautiful property, got revalued, increased in value. And 6 months later, the tenant moved in and said, everything's falling apart. So tenant ended up moving out and it was a very, very long process.
Did you go to court?
I did go to court.
Legal action?
I did take legal action and I won. We won. We were right. But we couldn't chase the money down. So it was a very, very expensive exercise. I don't recommend that.
No.
So just, maybe.
No dodgy handyman.
No dodgy handyman. Make sure you just check everybody's license and insurance is valid and up to date. Yeah.
So was that the biggest lesson that you've learnt from that property, or I feel like there's more coming?
There is more. That property is pain and pleasure. I say pain and pleasure. That's the painful part. We renovated it. We had tradesmen. They weren't qualified. They didn't have insurance. We took them to court. We won and we got nothing back out of it. So it costed us even more money. The pleasure part is obviously we subdivided it in a time I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
And it actually yielded me, a tidy sum. So I think out of that transaction, at the time, my salary as an assistant was $65,000 a year.
At the bank?
At the bank. I was an assistant private banker. And I sold that block for $58,000. In my eyes, it was 1 year's salary and I didn't lift a finger for it. It was a few phone calls, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few emails, a few phone calls. That's the pleasure part. But, Steve Jobs talks about connecting the dots, but you can only connect them after. Yeah, so
I don't know if he actually said that, but you said that with such conviction. I'm sure that is a true quote.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's a Scott Yip quote.
Yeah.
But anyway, that all happened, and the good thing is that happened, and I mean, you know about this. Like my sister got sick. She had stage 4 cancer, but selling that land at that time was pretty much critical for me to be able to take the next year off to look after
time with her,
and spend time with her and take care of her. So, I think sometimes in life you just don't know why things are happening or what's actually happening. But I actually think that it was
Destiny?
a gift. It was a gift, in preparation for that. So that was property number 3. Call it pain and pleasure.
Pain and pleasure. That could be the title of your new book.
Yeah.
On property.
Property, pain and pleasure.
Okay, so you still have that property?
I still have that. Right now, we are finalising a DA on it. We're going to put with 3 townhouses. I'll decide if we're going to sell that or take that project to completion.
So you've got an architect, all the drawings are done. You're just waiting for
council
approval, and then
council DA. Yeah. They've asked for a heritage report. They've asked for an engineer report. They've asked for a soil report. That's a lot of reports.
But so you're pretty much at the last stage of...
We're at the last stage. They wanted like an engineer's report to prove that the property's actually falling apart. But we've already got building reports. So I think our town planner went back to them and said, hey, look at this court case, look at these building reports. I don't think we really need that engineer report.
Yeah.
So we're waiting for them to respond.
So maybe you'll get an early Christmas present or
Maybe.
approval in the mail.
Yeah, hopefully.
Or maybe another birthday present.
Or maybe another
It's your
birthday present. I
coming
don't know.
up
Maybe this.
in November.
Yes.
Well, here's hoping. I have a feeling you're going to tell us about the fourth property now. Told us
Number
Lucky number
4.
4.
That was a JV, so I bought it in conjunction with one of our friends. You know, we actually bought it in a different structure. We bought it in a company structure instead of individuals, and that one we bought in the Lower Hunter region near Curry. If anybody knows where Curry is, Curry.
No. But is that close to your third property? Or?
No. Third property is Upper Hunter. This is Lower Hunter, so more closer to the white vineyards. Yeah. And then that was a corner block. We did that one up. Again, that was a weatherboard. You know, we had to change the piers, paint the outside, scrape the outside, paint the inside.
And you did that all yourself, or you?
We had help.
You
we
had
had help.
people,
We got tradesmen, and this time we got proper tradesmen.
Yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah, lesson learned. And then we subdivided the land, similar to property number 3. Lessons being brought forward. We sold the land and we sold the house. We thought we banked in some profit, but in actual fact, one part we didn't realize, part of this council was we were responsible for the construction of the gutter because it was non-sealed roads. So it was gravel roads with no gutter. So part of the DA or the splitting of the land was that we had to be responsible for the gutter. So you're probably thinking, oh, it's just some concrete, right?
No, that sounds complicated.
To me, I'm like, it's just some concrete. Just mold it. It's like Play-Doh.
And hope for the best. Water, go that way.
Yeah, but we had to get proper, you know, civil engineers, blah, blah, blah.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, the road that's not sealed is the longest side of the property. So I think
That's
it was
more
like
money.
54 meters long. So we had to build the gutter, the road gutter, and seal it off. And that pretty much stripped out most of our profits. Yeah. But it was a good experience, good learning experience. Yeah.
And you still have that?
No, we offloaded
you
both.
offloaded it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you own 2 properties now.
I own 2 properties now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And after all of that, all your ups and downs and pain and pleasure, as you said so eloquently, what would be in your opinion, your biggest lesson
My biggest
that you have learned from all
lesson? I'll bring it back to property number 2, Penrith. So at the time when I was putting the DA, I was so gung-ho that we were going to get the DA approved because we already spoke to somebody in council and they said, if you do these things, we'll approve it. And I was fielding out with certain agents, like if I sold a unit, what would the cost be? If I rented them, you know, how much rental return would I get on per unit? And then I managed to get through to a reputable agent locally called Jamaican Partners. Yeah. And the person I normally deal with wasn't available. I got a call back from an old man and it was Jamaican himself. And I was telling him what I was doing. And then he goes, son, you remind me of me when I was your age. He's actually that old. He actually sounds like that. And he goes, I'm going to teach you a lesson. And I go, what? And he goes, do you know the power of compounding? And I'm like, oh, you know, I'm a banker. I know what compounding is. He goes, but do you know the power of compounding? And I was like, no, tell me. And then he goes, so you must have bought your house 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's like you bought it at X price. And it's probably, if anything, doubled now. He goes, do you know why? And I went, oh, maybe because of Badger's Creek, the second airport. He goes, that's right. And then he goes to me, if you think your property now has doubled, right? And if you put 4 new properties, 4 townhouses on it now, what's your intention? And I said, maybe keep half, sell half. He goes, okay, so you would have doubled your position. So let's call them, each unit is worth 600,000. So you'd have 1.2 million, right? So he's like, if you keep 1.2, now if it's true what they say, that property doubles in price every 7 to 10 years. So let's say 10 years. So in 10 years, how much would your property be worth? I said 2.4. And he goes, now if you kept all 4, how much would it be worth? And I just went. He goes, and you just did it once. You just held it and you built up that equity. And so I was like, oh, that's the magic of compounding.
So you didn't learn that at the bank that you worked for?
Well, you understand compounding, but you don't actually understand in real life terms the magic of compounding, you know, just building that asset and waiting for it to do its thing, you know, increase in value.
That was a pivotal moment.
It was a pivotal moment. You know, in 10 years' time, I could have 2.4 million or I can have 4.8.
There you go.
Which one would you choose?
Okay, so that would be your, you know, most important lesson, or do you have a few more?
The next lesson is if you're trying to build a property portfolio, the number one lesson is don't screw yourself. Don't screw yourself.
Once more.
Don't screw yourself.
Okay, explain.
So don't screw yourself basically means building a property portfolio is, I think, strategy. Location's important, but strategy is the one that's going to help you build your property portfolio. If you're going to spend all of your borrowing power in one go, you're not going to be able to acquire the second one or the third one. So you really want to be going into that property plan thinking about your third or your fourth property and how to build that out, instead of saying, hey, I need to spend all my money and all my borrowing power on the one, because if you just buy the one, you'll be one and done.
One and done, I like it.
It's normally first home buyers. That's where I'm going at. So typically doing what I do in lending, first home buyers try to spend all of their borrowing power at once and they buy their first home. And the issue with that is typically with life stages, you buy your first home, you buy it with your partner, you get married, then you have kids, and then you actually reduce your borrowing power because you're married now, you've got a kid, it's extra living expenses, right? And so you're really switching off that borrowing ability. So if you spend it all at once on your first home, then it's going to be harder for you to buy that second one. Whereas another way of thinking of it is, you know, you might want to buy something less for your stepping stone property and maybe go into and buy your next investment and let that investment help you build into the next investment, build that equity, go again, you know, so you can build that portfolio. And you can easily do that. The number one thing I see with most people is that they get very closed vision in terms of where to buy and what to buy. So wherever they live is where they want to buy. But the reality is when you're investing in property, you don't necessarily need to look at one location. It could be many locations, and usually they're locations you never thought of, which are much more affordable with higher rental yields that can help you build that property portfolio. So I never intended to buy property, but I think growing up, Mum bought me a Lego box. If everybody remembers in the 80s, the Lego box, I think they still sell them now.
Yeah, the little trees.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't think there was much instructions there. It was just pretty much, here's a box of Lego, go figure it out. And I don't know how or why, but I would forever just be building a house. I'll build a house, I'll demolish it and build a new house and demolish it.
Yeah.
And then Mum would say to me, you know, when you grow up, what would you like to do? And I said, oh, I'll be a builder because I'm so good at building Lego. I'm like, I'll build you a house. Haven't done it yet. But maybe that was the beginning.
The building block.
The passion for property.
Yeah.
Lego. If you want to get your kids into property, give them Lego. There's a bit of teaching, a bit of learning. I joined Dipner Boholt's ultimate property class when I was in my 20s, like not 20s, but like 23, 24. At the time, I was very, very curious about property. I think I went to one of her seminars, and when I walked in there, I was probably the youngest person in the room. Most people in that room was grey and old.
Your age now.
Yeah, I know. Can you tell?
Late 30s.
I haven't dyed my hair. They were mainly grey and old, and it was a little bit intimidating because I'm like, am I supposed to be here? Am I not supposed to be here? But I want to learn about property. I think I learned a lot about property through that, and there was quite a few coaches there that would kind of just speak to you and help you and kind of tell you about it. At the same time, it is your own journey, because good thing about Dipner is she teaches you the skill, she teaches you the knowledge, and it's really up to you to kind of execute and bring that to life yourself. So everybody's in that cohort would have a different experience, different learning, because based on your property strategy. So a lot of it's, you know, trial and error, figuring it out, but you had some guides as well.
And And speaking of strategy and goals, what would, like now at the age of 38, what would be your strategy now? And any future property goals you want to share with everyone?
Absolutely. So strategy's really changed now. So I think in my 20s and 30s, I was very gung-ho, like, hey, let's find a block, knock it over, try to build some townhouses. I realize when you're not very experienced in it, there's quite a few depths of knowledge you probably need to understand a little bit more. And it's okay, you can learn it on your own and you can have that experience on your own. But most importantly, to kind of bring that to fruition, you really need time.
Yeah.
And you need to be available to make calls during the day. And when you're working full time in a demanding job, you just don't really have that ability to do that. So I think my property lesson in my 30s is property portfolio. So building that property portfolio. You know, if I had spent that time and money and energy in building that property portfolio from Penrith onwards, my portfolio would be completely different today compared to if I was gung-ho in doing townhouse. So the way I look at it is maybe in my 20s, I was maybe more of an active investor. I would do the renos myself, while try to participate and do the subdivisions and do the townhouses. Whereas in my 30s and 40s, I recognize time is valuable. Mm-hmm. Energy is limited, and property portfolio with a team is critical. You know, people can do the research, they can tell you where the data and analytics is really pointing to.
Yeah.
And you just build that portfolio and grow your asset and your income.
Great. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for watching this episode of Catching Up with Property. I'm Scott.
I'm Pauline.
And I hope you got to learn a little bit about my property journey and how I got started. Catch you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.